Hello, I'm Alison Green-Myers. My pronouns are she, her. I am the program director here at the Highlights Foundation, and I'm joining you from northeastern Pennsylvania on the traditional and contemporary lands of the Lenape Nation. Welcome to this month's HF Gather. A note for our dear attendees, just a reminder, this is a webinar style gather, so we cannot see your video, we cannot hear your audio during the session, but we can see the things that you put in the chat, and we can see any questions you put in the Q&A feature. Please feel free to use the chat to put your ahas and your thank yous and your hellos, really anything that you want to share with us, and then move those questions into the Q&A feature, and we'll get to just as many as we can at the end of our conversation tonight. Just a reminder that in these spaces, the chat, the Q&A, really anywhere we come together as the Highlights Foundation, we ask for your respectful engagement. At the Highlights Foundation, you know that we strive for a safe and inclusive environment, and that means joining in our sessions with no hate, no harm, and no harassment of any kind. We'll ask you to be mindful of what you say, of what we say, because of course, we know how we treat one another will be reflected in the work that we do for children. Let's grow in tonight's conversation together with appreciation and respect. Many of you on the gather are our friends. You've been with us for several sessions. Maybe you've even been with us out at the campus. You probably know that our mission here at the Highlights Foundation is to positively impact children by amplifying the voices of storytellers who inform, educate, and inspire children to become their best selves. I also hope that you've heard the mission of Highlights for Children, who are helping children become their best selves by publishing content and creating experiences that engage, delight, and foster joyful learning. So here we are, two organizations. We're uniquely tied together, the Highlights Foundation and Highlights for Children. And we both have these missions to serve children. We're both out here wanting to help children find their best selves. And that feels quite right to come together and talk. After all, we know at Highlights, the ideal is that children are the world's most important people. And yet, for two organizations like ours, with so much in common, what's unexpected tonight is that we've never gathered quite like this before. We've never brought our Highlights Foundation community together to celebrate Highlights for Children and their newest endeavor that delights, that engages, that fosters joyful learning. Because this new endeavor, unlike so much of their previous work, has been crafted with care, not directly for children. Instead, this new adventure is for grown-ups. It's for us. It's for educators and parents and caregivers and counselors and elders, all who want to help children become their best selves. We want children to feel loved and supported and empowered. We want adults to stop in this very busy world and listen, really listen, lean into what kids have to say about growing up, about surviving, and most importantly, about thriving in this world. So tonight's gather is all about this special book, Dear Highlights, and the movement behind it. And with us is Christine French-Cully, our special guest. For those of you who haven't met Chris, she serves Highlights in many, many ways. I'll list a few that I know. I'm sure there are others that I'll leave out. She is the Chief Purpose Officer. She is an Editor-in-Chief. She is the author of Dear Highlights. She is a board member to the Highlights Foundation. And as I said, so much more. I have gotten to know Chris over the last decade plus, and I will tell you, she is the kind of companion that listens. She asks thoughtful, curious questions. And when she speaks, you know her words come from the heart, from a real, genuine place of kindness, compassion, and even wonder. So I am delighted to be with all of you and to be in Chris's company tonight to listen and to learn and to talk about this very special book. Welcome to HF Gather, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that incredible introduction. That was so lovely. I have been looking forward to this for a couple months now. And I can't wait to talk to you about this really unique book. And I'm just excited to be here. I feel like, these are my people here, and we all are, after the same thing. So it's really exciting to put our heads together and share, elevate the voices of kids in this way. That's what we do, elevate the voices of kids.
I love that. Yeah, and I think we're so excited to kind of come together and talk about the book, because the moment that you hold the book in your hand, it's a different experience. Like I can hold it right here, but this book isn't static. It doesn't stay in place, as much as the type is set on the page. This book is meant to move, and it's meant to move between reader and words, between reader and you, the author, and really between reader and the kids who have stepped forward to express themselves. That's such power in this object. I think Dear Highlights has movement to it. And I know you've talked about the movement behind Dear Highlights. So I would love if you would take, just a few moments, tell us about the book, about the structure, about writing the book, and then also, what is this movement that you're thinking of with Dear Highlights?
Yeah, thank you. And I love thinking about the book, about the dynamic nature of the book. That's really wonderful. Thank you for that. Because it is part time capsule. This is a collection of letters and emails and poems and drawings that kids have sent to Highlights over our 75-year history. So there is that sort of historical aspect to it, but at the same time, it is a picture of childhood today. We'll get into some more of that later, but first, let me answer your question about the movement, because that is so exciting to me. We really view this as being more than a book. We hope it will spark a national movement that reminds parents and grandparents, educators, children's writers, everybody who cares about kids, of the importance of leaning in and listening to children. This is our 75th anniversary at Highlights. And so we have long dreamed about publishing this book, and this seemed like the perfect time to do it. For our whole history, kids have been engaging with the magazine through letters. I like to say that we were interactive before anybody was using that word when it comes to children's content, long before the digital people came in and sort of captured it. Kids have been writing to us forever, and we have a long-held tradition from our very beginning of answering every child who writes to us. And we think that over our 75-year history, we have received more than 2 million pieces of correspondence from children. That's a lot of letters and drawings and poems. So we've learned a lot from this. I often say that our practice of answering every letter from children is a win-win-win. It's a win for the child who has written to express a concern or to ask for some guidance, and usually thinks that they're going to receive a reply. I mean, they write with that kind of trust that children have, Their parents, on the other hand, are often surprised when their child receives a response from us. And it's a win for them because they often find some helpful parenting information in our reply, or they learn something about their child that they wouldn't have known otherwise, because their children often tell us things in letters that they haven't yet told their parents.
Mhm.
And it's a win for us at Highlights because it beautifully informs our work. We have learned so much by leaning in and listening to kids, by reading their letters and responding in thoughtful ways, that we feel an obligation to share what we've learned with others. So that's why we wanted to publish this book. We wanted to elevate kids' voices, give them a national platform, and remind people that kids are the world's most important people. And what they crave is more connection. What they crave is more meaningful parents with the adults they love. They want their feelings validated. They want to be heard. And leaning in and listening is a small thing that we can all do that makes a huge difference in the lives of children.
I love that. I in some of the letters too, the first line would be hello, but the second line would be, I would like a response, or I would like a reply. And, I know that you've had kids who have talked about it in the book too. They've written again and again, so they don't add that second line after they know, they're going to get a response. They're going to hear from you for sure.
Yeah, I just love, it takes a lot of courage for kids to share their innermost thoughts and feelings in a letter to really a stranger.
Mhm.
They don't know us, but what's interesting is that they write to us always as if we are a dear, trusted friend,
Mhm.
and we try to respond to them in kind. But it does take a lot of courage to share some of the things that they've shared with us over the years, and to believe that we'll respond to them in an appropriate way. It just really speaks to the goodwill of children. And
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to see, I think I have a nice spread here too, just in case people haven't seen the book. It's a textured experience. It's a layered experience because you have the handwritten letters, you have some typed letters. You also have poetry, you have songs, you have illustrations, you have, stick figures that have been drawn and sent in. And I think, the structure that you've chosen for the book is so interesting. The way that you've divided up the topics, and then also the inclusion of poems and pictures, and songs and things like that. Was that your idea? Was that a creative discussion, collaboratively, with your team?
Yeah, that was a collaborative discussion. And I want to give a shout out to my colleagues at Highlights, Mary Alice Moore, Liz Van Doren, and the book's editor, Marlo Scramizzi. We sat around and together decided what the structure of the book should be like. And it was clear to us that we should include the poems and the drawings because kids, when you look at them in the book, you'll see that is one way that kids express their innermost feelings. Another way, some kids write in letters. Some kids find it hard to express their thoughts and feelings in words, so they draw. And some kids use thoughts and words to write a poem. And we learn so much from how kids are feeling about something by looking at their poems and drawings. A really good example of this is 9/11. When a significant world event occurs, something tragic like 9/11, we might think we're protecting our children, but our children are impacted by those kinds of things. That's when we get a little uptick in drawings and poems. And when they come in, they often travel solo to our offices in the envelope. They don't come with a letter where kids are expressing how they feel. They let the poem or the drawing do the talking for them. We look at those very, very carefully after a world event like 9/11 or the Columbine shooting or the Columbia space shuttle explosion, because we know that embedded in those drawings and poems are kids' request for guidance, for validation of their very deep feelings. They're asking for recognition that this event has impacted them. So we write to those kids, we send them a letter, just as if they had written us a letter and said, what's going on, help me process this event. So it was really important for us to include poems and drawings. And it does give the book a lot of texture.
It really does. And it's interesting that you say that. One of the um, sections of the book that I was surprised by, just because of the timing of the book coming out, and but the sheer collection of coronavirus or COVID-19. And there are so many drawings in that section, and there are poems in that section. And just as you're saying, this global event, this global crisis, and the kids are reaching out to you and looking for to be heard, looking for support and for guidance.
Absolutely. We worked on this book during the pandemic, and in some of the darkest days of staying safer at home and feeling very isolated. What was interesting about our reader mail during that time was that for the first time in our history, we were going through the same things the kids were writing to us about. That had never happened before. They were writing to us to say that they were bored staying at home. They were writing to us saying that they worried about their health and the health of their loved ones. They were writing to say they were confused. What the heck was the coronavirus? They missed school. Oh my goodness, they missed school. We were going through all those same emotions ourselves, and that never happened before. So we were able to answer those letters and respond to those drawings and poems with a degree of empathy that I think we had not been able to do before. It was a very interesting experience for us.
I want to talk a little bit more about that piece. Just, I think in broad terms, like just thinking about what you said, 2 million responses. It all gets opened. The poems, the drawings, the songs, the letters, the Valentines. I mean, it all gets opened. And there was a section in the book, and you quoted and you said, no one took lightly the task of answering children's letters. It was considered an honor and a basic tenet of the company's core belief. When a child writes to you, you write back with care and respect. Oh. Let's talk a little bit about that. How you're bringing new people onto your team. How do you prepare for a culture like Highlights? You're coming to work for Highlights. Is it a collaborative process when you go to respond to that number of letters that come in? How do you do training, and what is that like?
Yeah. It's one of the things I really love most about Highlights. I think it demonstrates how we try hard to walk the talk. We really do believe that children are the world's most important people. And if you think about it, it isn't an activity that actually favorably impacts the bottom line. So we do it, for altruistic reasons. The founders of the magazine, Dr. Gary Cleveland Myers and his wife, Caroline Clark Myers, at the magazine's founding, answered the mail themselves. They felt strongly, as you say, that if a child writes you a letter, you honor that child by writing back. The number became so great that they couldn't do it all themselves. And so at that time, they picked some members of the editorial staff whom they believed understood that this was, in fact, a sacred task. And they trained those editors to answer the letters. And we continue that today. Most of the letters are answered by members of our editorial team. And we do put them through a pretty rigorous training process. We want to make sure that all of the letters are answered in the Highlights voice. We have a way we answer letters, and we have an approach to particular problems that we want the editors to share with the readers. It's tricky. We never have enough context in any letter to really understand the situation the child is experiencing. We do our best. And I often tell editors who are nervous about getting a letter exactly right that the most important thing we can do is make sure that the child feels heard. So what we do in every response is first validate their feelings. We want them to understand that what they're feeling is normal, that they're not the only one who feels this way, and your feelings aren't wrong. You feel what you feel. We want them to feel heard. So we try to listen with empathy. we never give them one answer or one suggested solution to their problem, because we want kids to grow up understand that they have agency and that they're capable of solving their own problems. So we try to give them a variety of suggestions of ways they might approach their situation. I think it was Franklin D. Roosevelt who said, "A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor." We want kids to be resilient. And that's what they're doing in childhood. They're doing a lot of heavy lifting. They're trying to figure out what they're interested in, what they're good at, who they are, where they belong, what place they have in the world. So you don't want to provide them with the answers. They have to do some of this figuring out themselves, but they ask for adult guidance. They want adult guidance, and you can give it to them without telling them what to do. And we always, at the end of every letter, encourage kids to find a caring adult whom they know and talk about their problem or their situation with that adult, because we just can't know enough to know everything. Now, most of the letters we get are about the normal ups and downs of childhood. Most of them fall into the category of school, friendship, and family, the three most important influences in children's lives. We do on occasion, however, get more serious letters. And so in those cases, we look to external experts to help us craft the best possible replies we can. We have a network of child psychologists, educators, people with all kinds of specialties that review our answers before we send them for those really significant critical questions, or who might craft an answer for us first. And we learn from them all the time. Sometimes internally, an answer might be very collaborative. When a child writes to us with a serious problem, several of us review the answer before we send it off in the mail. We want to do everything we can to get it just right.
I don't know how many people on the call tonight have listened to your podcast, the Dear Highlights podcast. That is so illuminating, because you will share a letter and you have an expert right there with you, kind of talking through not just the response itself, but kind of like you were saying, you don't know maybe the whole context, and an expert who has worked with hundreds and thousands of children, maybe on a specific topic, they can kind of help to give some context to those letters. So hopefully we'll put a link to that Dear Highlights podcast, because it really is excellent. Your experts that you have come in and talk with are just wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be great. Yeah, it's such an honor to talk to some of those folks. And they're all so delighted to participate.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I was just having a conversation today with someone about letter writing. It's something I really love to do. I love the physical act of writing letters, and know several people who do. And when I think about, a kid writing by hand, or, typing an email, whatever, as you said, it really is such a brave act. They're not only speaking up and reaching out, which as adults, how often do we do that? But they're reaching out. But the letter writing itself is processing too. And, as you pointed out, some of the letters are very difficult to read. And I can only imagine how difficult it was for them to put the words on the page and then, get those words out to someone else, that someone else would see it. Maybe in the chat a little bit, maybe some people could mention if they've read the book already. I know some people, just names that I've seen come in, have read the book, or if you've listened to the podcast. But if you haven't, or even if you have, you might not have heard one of the letters yet. You might not have heard one of the stories or this bravery that's told in a letter. So tonight during the gather, Chris, you would be willing to pick one, any one of them, and share a letter with us. Can you read it out loud to us? Similar to how you do on the podcast.
Sure. It's hard to choose just one. Gosh, I could read them all night long. But I've selected one from 2017. And before I read it, I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not, but one big surprise for us was how similar the letters were. Kids write to us about the same fundamental things today that they did in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. It's pretty remarkable. The outside world has changed, but kids' inner worlds haven't changed that much. This is a letter from Clara. We've actually changed all the names of the kids in the book to protect their privacy, but we're calling her Clara, and she's 9. And she wrote, "Dear Highlights, I once wrote to you before with a piece of art. Now I come for advice. My dad is in the military and he's away for 6 months. We can't know where he is, and it's really hard. I act up and I can't calm myself. Please help. What should I do when I'm mad? I'm nervous and I'm driving my mother nuts. Please write back. I'm 9 years old and should control myself. Help." And she signed it, "Nervous in New Jersey." And we wrote back to her and said, "Dear Clara, in our experience, it's hard to stop feelings from occurring. But while we can't always control how we feel, we can control how we act. The next time you feel your anger building, you could say, 'I'm starting to feel upset, so I need to take a break.' Then quietly find a place to be alone. Take deep breaths as you count to 10. Another idea is to channel your feelings into a positive activity, such as drawing, writing, or exercising. You might even decide to write in a journal. You could also use your journal to keep track of your daily activities so you can tell your dad all about them when you get the chance. Or you could draw pictures and write stories to give to your dad when he returns. We also encourage you to talk to your mom about this. You can also talk to another trusted adult. Sometimes upset feelings are like boiling water in a covered pot. They bubble and get hotter and hotter until they can't be contained anymore. Sharing a concern is like lifting the cover off the pot. Heat is released and the bubbling becomes much less, or it stops entirely. We're glad you wrote to us and we hope this helps. Your dad is doing a brave thing for our country and we appreciate his dedication and service."
Lovely. That's so lovely.
I chose that one because I really liked how we explained how helpful it is to talk about your feelings.
Mhm. Wonderful. And she signed that one. I think in the book, it also says, "And this is how I would like to be referred to." Is that true? Is that the
Yes.
one?
Yes, I think she thought if we published it, she wanted it signed that way. I sort of wish that when we replied, we had said, "Dear Nervous in New Jersey," since
Right.
that was her preference. But
The personality, the voice, I know that there are a number of writers on the call, the voice that comes through, because the kids are being their genuine, authentic, vulnerable selves when they're writing to you. It really comes through in each of the letters. That one also in particular. I'm 9.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to probably do just one more question together. And then I know we want to get to some of the questions in the Q&A. I would encourage anyone who is here, whether you've read Dear Highlights, listen to the podcast or not, we hope that you'll bring your questions to Chris to talk. We're here to talk about the book, yes, but also about highlights for children, about these wonderful letters. I know that you can answer a number of questions about the magazine as well, should those come up as well. I saw in the chat someone mentioned, and I thought about this a little bit, Chris, but one of the things that you can see when you're looking at the responses in the book is that you had mentioned that this, the letters, so many of them are so similar. I remember looking up, I had read one letter and, I think it was the 1970s, I want to say, and not too many pages later, it was a similar book and it was in the similar letter in the early 2000s. But what I noticed more than anything were the responses that changed.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about that, kind of the evolution of the responses themselves?
Sure. Marlo and I spent several days at the Ohio State University where this treasure trove of letters is archived. And Marlo spent more days there than I did. And we read hundreds of letters from children. And when we looked at the responses, we were a little bit surprised at how we had answered some of the earlier letters. And as we thought about it some more and dug around a little bit, we realized that the letters were reflective of the parenting style of that era. Back in those earlier decades of Highlight's existence, parents were a little more authoritative. They were a little less likely to lean in and listen with empathy and understanding and curiosity. Mm-hmm. And that's reflected in the letters. Also, I think the individual personalities of the editors were more reflected in the earlier responses. We wished sometimes that we had answered some of the letters with more empathy. If we were to answer them today, I think they would have been answered more empathetically. Sometimes they feel a little brusque, a little too abrupt, and we would have spent a little more time validating kids' feelings and making sure that they felt heard. So that was interesting to us that that's how our responses have evolved over the years. The book is very much a snapshot of who Highlights was and is, and of the times,
Yeah, and I think the beauty of embracing that and then also showcasing the need for growth, showcasing your own vulnerability at Highlights for Children and saying, we're following the needs of the children. We're following the direction that they need to become their best selves. And you've learned more. So you're going to pass that along in those responses. It really is beautiful.
Yeah. One of the things we were too slow to do, we were sort of horrified when we looked at the letters as a group. We were too slow to stop saying, talk to your parents, plural, about this. It took us a while to say, wait a minute, a lot of these kids only have access to one parent. Mm-hmm. And there were a few other things like that we recognized with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. You do put in the letters, the more recent letters, even farther. You say a trusted adult or an adult that you know and trust. So even removing that idea, I think that it would have to be a parent too. Exactly. So that evolution.
Increasingly, kids are living with grandparents and don't have access or feel they can't talk to their parents, either one of them, if they have access to them. Yeah, it's the world has changed a little bit, and the way we talk to kids has changed. Yeah, we keep trying to get better and better. And we were committed to publishing those responses exactly the way they were written at the time.
Sure. So I can see there are some questions that are coming in the Q&A. If it would be okay to turn, I've enjoyed having your time and asking so many questions that I have about the book and about the movement. But I see here some really thoughtful questions. One of them is from Holly, and Holly wrote, how do you select the letters that get included in the book? And I go a step farther and say, what about letters and poems and drawings that get into the magazine? Can you tell us a little bit about the book selection and then also the magazine selection?
Sure. It was really hard to choose the letters for the books, for the book. There were so many good ones that we left in the archives, and we joked that we might have to do a volume 2. But we tried to find letters that really spanned the whole spectrum of kids' concerns and that were representative of the kind of mail we get. So the book has 11 chapters and it's organized thematically. We organized the books by theme, and we tried to make sure that we had a representation of boys and girls, and that we just covered as many different subjects and themes as we could. It was difficult. And we also tried to find a couple letters from as many decades as we could. We didn't actually start saving our letters until 1981, I believe. Wow. I'd saved some prior to that. So there are some that go back to the 60s. And I think there might be one from the 50s in the book. But we didn't make a commitment to save them all until 81. So it got harder to get some of the older ones. in there. For the magazine, when we choose letters to publish in the column Dear Highlights, we try to choose questions from kids that are universal, not the unusual questions, but because we want kids as they read the column in their issue of the magazine to take away something that's useful to them. So the questions tend to be more universal in nature. And of course, we edit our response way down. The actual response, the child gets is much longer than what you would read in the magazine.
Right.
And again, we look for boys and girls.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I did notice that the difference in seeing the full response in the book versus when you're going through the magazine every month and you can see the response that's in there, they really do get quite a response to each of the letters too. There's a question in here, just to follow up on that one. I think that's great. It asks about permissions. It said, it's from Mary, and Mary says, do you need permission to print these letters or the pictures or poems, etc.?
Yeah. Our legal department tells us when a child sends us a letter and a poem, it is our property. So we try to treat them very respectfully. As I say, we change the names of all the kids. We protect their privacy, but we do not need permission.
Mm-hmm. I wondered also, you changed the name of the child. There are so many letters that say their sibling's name, that say their best friend's name, and the person's name who might be bullying them or picking on them in school. Do you change all of the names that come in?
We work really hard to protect kids' privacy.
Yeah.
So we do everything we can. When children write us emails, and we do get a lot of emails as well as letters, we follow strict COPPA requirements so that a child's privacy is always protected.
That's great. I think this follows up just on that same theme here. There's so many great questions in the Q&A, but do you also sometimes get letters from parents or adults?
We do. The last chapter of the book is called What We've Learned. And in that chapter, I quote some of the letters we've received from parents. After they've read the letters we wrote back to their children. And you'll see that many times they're grateful. They learned something they didn't know, or they were surprised at the extent of the emotion their child was feeling about something in particular. Their child had expressed it differently to us, or just sheerly by virtue of the fact that child bothered to write to us about it, helped them see that, oh, this was a bigger deal to my son or daughter than I realized. So they're grateful. And sometimes they write back to us and thank us for giving them some ideas on how to parent their child better. I mean, that wasn't our primary motivation when we answered the child, but when that happens, that's great. And sometimes they write back to us to let us know how things worked out, or kids themselves on occasion will write and let us know how it worked out. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we're glad.
You might every once in a while sit around and say, I wonder how.
Yeah, well, we talk in the book about one young man who sent us 200 letters over a 10-year period. And that's unusual. That's the only case we have like that. But nevertheless, 200, we wrote to him 200 times over the course of 10 years. And we often wonder where he is today and how he's managing. He started to feel a little bit like family.
Yeah, of course. That question came from Dwight. I noticed that I was saying names as the questions were coming in, and I missed that one. I'm going to tie two together here. I have one from Christina and one from Ramona. And I know that a number of people listening in tonight are writers. And so both of them have to do with storytellers and writers. As a children's book writer, I wonder if there are any themes that you see a need for, based on the letters, for kids' books. Any advice that you could give on do's or don'ts for writers by what you've gleaned from the letters themselves?
Well, I might phrase that a little differently. I might say, how can this book help children's writers? Is that all right? Because
the other question said just that.
Okay. I think we'll cover all bases with that. One of the big learnings from this book is that children's lives, children's worlds are personal and intimate. And the things that worry them the most are, I want to say small. They seem small to us. They're big to kids, but they're really about their day-to-day lives. And the detail that you can draw from the letters is pretty amazing. I think we all like to think we remember childhood. And as children's writers, that's kind of an exercise you go through, right? To try to remember what it was like to be a child. The truth is, our memories are pretty blurry. We think we remember, but we don't quite remember. And again, we have this hindsight where we know that most things work out. So we might tend to diminish how important an issue is in the life of the child in that moment. But the detail in the letters, just for me, and I think for other readers of the book, they've told me this, it just brings to life the memories of childhood and creates a more vivid picture of what it's like to be a kid. You know, you read a letter from a child who is so distressed because she's 9 years old, and by golly, she is old enough to cross the street by herself, but her mother and grandmother insist that she hold their hands. And she wants to cross the street alone to play with her friends on the other side. So you're just reminded of that tug of war that happens to every kid. You know, parents want to keep them closely tethered and they want to cut the rope and go out and do their own thing. You sort of forget what that feeling is like. The young man who said, I'm a romance kind of boy. My friends hate it, but I'm a romance kind of guy. And what do I do about this? Oh, you know, all the story ideas that can probably come out of a thought like that. What a character in a children's book that might begin to create. So I think the intimacy of it, the personal nature of these letters, that would help any children's writer with dialogue, with story ideas, with authenticity. That's what we've tried to do, is elevate kids' voices and share what we think. We think we have an authentic ongoing dialogue with kids, and we want to share that because we've learned so much. Did that answer the question a little bit?
Yes, and that elevate children's voices. That's a phrase to write down and remember. I'm going to do the same thing here because we have a number of questions remaining, and we'll probably only have time for just a few more. I'm going to combine two questions here, one from Sue and one that's from an anonymous attendee. But the question is about being able to tell through the letters about changes in your audience at highlights. The person asking the question said, you know, I remember reading highlights at the dentist or pediatrician's office. One, do you think you're reaching a more diverse audience? And then the other part of that question that came through was, do you receive letters from children with disabilities or with chronic illnesses, either as part of the book itself or just in the number of letters that come in?
Yes, I think we've always had a fairly diverse audience. Of course, it's much more diverse today, and we hear from those readers. You know, as I said, in many ways, childhood hasn't changed, but in some ways, the world has changed, and it has changed the way children think and the things that they write to us about. We get letters now from kids who are questioning their sexual orientation. We get letters from children who have parents who are same gender. We didn't used to get those before. We receive questions from children who do have disabilities. Teasing, bullying is one constant thread we've received letters about bullying all through the decades, but the things kids are bullied about today are a little bit different. We receive more letters from children who are experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. And we even receive from time to time letters from kids who say that they are contemplating suicide. I think I got off the track of the question a little bit, but just to speak to the diversity of letters we get and the ways that our audience has changed, yes. All the things that are going on in the world, we see changing in our changing kids' mail.
Yes, definitely. And that Mary Jeanette asks a really great question, kind of in taking in and absorbing all of these letters. how has that shaped maybe your choices for magazine articles, for content that you're putting out then? After hearing from kids, what ways does that shape what you're putting back out into the world?
Well, we're certainly much more careful to make sure that we get representation right. We want to make, we know that we have many children who come from many different walks of life, and we want every child to see themselves reflected in the pages of highlights. So maybe a particular issue is not as diverse as we might like, but over the course of a year's subscription, we try to make sure that we show every kind of family our readers come from, every kind of situation. We work really hard at representation. And also, I think we're a little less reluctant to tackle some harder subjects. We probably more directly create articles that help kids, that talk about what you need to do to become your best self. I was just looking at some layouts for upcoming January issue, and we have this really nice piece in there about bravery, and it speaks to moral courage, and and it reminds kids that we all have the capability of being brave and doing hard things. Growth mindset. Yeah, I think as we hire more and more people who come to work for Highlights because they believe children are the world's most important people, and they really want to be involved in doing good things for kids and families, and that's the kind of staff we have. We are much more intentional about making sure that we do everything we can to help kids understand that every person is deserving of dignity and respect, and kindness is never wasted. And, if you try hard and do your best, you can show yourself and others that you can do great things. We have these core beliefs, these fundamental beliefs that we try to put into everything we do. And we're just more and more committed because of the way the world is. I always say the world needs highlights now more than ever. Kids need highlights now more than ever. And, it doesn't matter what they write to us about, and it doesn't really matter who's doing the writing. This is what all the letters have in common. Embedded in every single question kids ask us is this question: do you care? Am I loved? Do I matter? That's what they're really asking, no matter what the other question seems to be. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. And when we say to kids, I'm listening, we say to kids, yes, you matter, and what you think and feel matters. And that's how we get kids on the path to becoming their best selves. That's how they become independent adults with a positive outlook on life, who are going to do great things to change the world. Sorry, I get on my soapbox.
No, I feel like it's
really
so powerful. It really is. It's beautiful. And it's like you are speaking to your hope for children, but you're speaking to the hope for us, because if it can reflect in adults too in the world, just imagine the change that can happen. Everything that you're doing, imagine all of that change. You change makers, you at Highlights for Children. There are two last questions. I'm going to sneak them in because if we can clear the Q&A box, it makes me feel like we've heard from our participants, and that's so important. I think they're two great ones. One of them is a clarifying question, and it's from Susan, and she says, is there an acknowledgments for letters that are not chosen in publication that say something like, thank you for writing? I think you've touched on this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We answer every letter. Every child gets a return letter or email. And often we say, especially if they specifically ask if their letter will be published, we explain that we don't have room to publish them all, but we read and reply to everyone.
Absolutely. That's great. And then this last one from Patricia. Hi, Patricia, is asking a great one to end on, I think here, Chris. Is there a Dear Highlights book 2 in the works? I hope so. I think this is a multi-volume series. And well, she says, congratulations to you.
Yeah, thank you. We have enough letters and drawings and poems that we could do a volume 2.
That's wonderful.
And it would
Wonderful.
be an honor. It really was such an honor for me. I've been at Highlights a long time. And so finally at this stage of my career to be able to help curate this really amazing collection of expressions of kids' voices was such an honor. And, again, I'm grateful for everybody at Highlights. It took a village. It was a lot of work. The book is beautifully designed. So many people. I mean, I often say that this is a book that should win a prize for having the most co-authors, because while I wrote these little introductions to each chapter and to sort of tied the book together with connective tissue, much of the book is really in the kids' own words and in the words of the Highlights editors who came before me, who have written so many empathetic replies to kids, who are still writing empathetic replies to kids. So this book was really the product of a lot of work and thinking of a lot of people. And it's just a pleasure to be associated with it.
That's lovely. Well, Chris, as we're coming up on the end of our hour here together, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for
Has it been an hour already?
Yeah, I know. We just saw each other. Yeah, well, we'll just keep you on. We'll keep talking. I think a lot of people said, keep Chris talking. Let her get back on her soapbox again. So if you want to do that,
I can do that very easily.
But I definitely want to thank you for your time this evening and for Dear Highlights, the podcast and the book. I feel like you're right here with me, talking with me during that podcast. I love it so much, especially those episodes on mental health, on bravery, on fear. They are things we should all be taking the time to stop the busyness and listen to these words coming from kids. But also, thank you for everything you do to make sure that kids feel heard and feel seen and feel supported. It is very important work.
Thank you. And right back to you guys too, and to everybody on the call. The power of words and pictures to influence kids can't be overestimated. So we're all doing good work for kids. We need to keep doing it. As I say, the world needs people who care about kids to write for kids and to share their voices. Thank you.
Well, let me echo that and give another big, big, big thank you. I know Chris shared a few names here, but I want to say thank you to the entire Highlights for Children group. They are responsible for so much that we see and so much that we can't possibly see. Just reading and responding to those letters from kids. Thank you for doing that, for having a child feel seen and feel heard. Thank you for all of the caring content that you're putting out. And thank you for this book. It's wonderful. To our gathered guests, I want to thank you for being here. We are grateful for your support and your care as well. And before we get to our closing, I also want to say a very special thank you to our team, Highlights Foundation, who make events like this possible. I know on the call tonight, I have Christine Ahern, and one of those other special people from our team, George Brown, our executive director. I know he would like to close out the evening. George, wasn't that fun?
Wow, that was great. And Chris, it was more of an emotional journey than I was expecting. So thank you so much for that. I like to think that I'm a Highlights kid through and through. And from the time I was 8 years old outside of the Highlights editorial offices, waiting for my father to finish work, I always wanted to be a part of Highlights. My first job at Highlights in the editorial work with the magazine, working for Chris and the team, involved a lot of letter answering. And as you were talking about how the letters happen and how the answering happens, I remember back to learning how to craft those letters and how to make sure the responses were thoughtful. And I still use that model today when crafting responses. So thank you for that. And what I didn't realize, that it would trigger a memory of my father when he was the editor of Highlights magazine, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and he was out here on the porch of my great-grandparents' home, the founder's home of Highlights. And he had this dictaphone, and he would talk into it, and he would be answering kids' mail into the night. That was kind of his evening work that he would do. And so that was a fun memory. And the last memory, you mentioned going to Ohio State University and sifting through the boxes and boxes of mail from the kids. when I was in high school, I spent 2 weeks in the summer sifting through those letters in a warehouse and labeling the boxes that had been sitting there for years. So it's fun to see that they've made their way into an official archive with the Ohio State University. So thank you so much, Chris, for doing this with us, to bring the Highlights Corporation and the Highlights Foundation together for this conversation on children and what we can learn about children.
My
I
pleasure.
did post in the chat that Chris has agreed to autograph a few copies of Dear Highlights, and being one for always wanting to find a way to have a fundraising opportunity to support the Highlights Foundation and the work that we do to positively impact children, to amplify the voices of storytellers. We will send you an autographed copy of that book with your $75 donation to celebrate 75 years of Highlights. We'll certainly email you the link if you're so moved. You can always find the book at your favorite bookstore at a normal retail price as well. So thank you so much, Chris, Allison, what a lovely chat. It's been a wonderful evening. Have a great night.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, everyone. And for tonight, we wish you great safety and peace. Go read those letters and write some letters too. Good night.